debate. Welcome, thank you to those of you who have made it in person, and welcome online to those of you who quite sensibly haven't tried to cross the water. Items 1 to 3 will dispatch in about 5 minutes in total. We have a written public question and a verbal public question, so we'll, if needs be, we'll allow the full 15 minutes to those be heard. We'll move, item 5 will take us a couple of minutes. Then item 10 will follow item 5, the SACRE report, and 10 to 15 minutes for that. Item 6, performance and budget, 25 minutes. Item 7, fostering annual report. That's a very, very, very long and thorough report. Thank you for that. But don't feel that you have to read it all. If you can summarise it, we'll allow 20 minutes around it because the adoption report, there's a lot there, and 20 minutes each for fostering and 20 minutes for adoption. Children's social care review, again, around 20 minutes. Now, these are just indicated times, so don't worry too much. And then we've got the committee's work plan and members' questions time. Any apologies, changes in membership, substitutions, etc.?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Lever and Councillor Ellis with a substitution from Councillor Atmore.
Minutes of the previous meeting, is everyone happy that they are true and accurate representation? Propose, or me, yes, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Downer. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Hendry.
I'm chair of governors at Holy Cross Catholic Primary School and a governor at Queensgate Foundation Primary School.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
I'm employed in a number of schools as a coach. They vary from day to day virtually, so I won't give a full list at this stage.
Thank you. And I will declare that my youngest is going through the AHCP process. Item 4, public question time, starting with Simon Richards. So Simon, if you wanted to, I know that you've got a written answer, but I think it's important we hear your question, even though there's not much point in the answer being read out again, but please feel free to read your question.
Thank you, Chair. I refer to my question PQ0923 regarding school place planning to the meeting of this committee on the 2nd of March this year, in response to which the Cabinet Member for Children's Services stated that a strategic place plan for Island schools is on the forward plan scheduled for the 8th of June Cabinet meeting. I'm aware from media reports that the paper proposing 4 school closures was withdrawn and not discussed at Cabinet, although this paper made no reference to a strategic place plan. Has this committee seen the strategic place plan, and what update can be provided on next steps, given that a strategic place plan is no longer included in the current version of the forward plan?
Thank you, Mr. Richards. So there is an answer, the written answer from Stuart. Actually, thank you for that, Stuart. So we won't go into that any further, other than to say that we are in danger of this coming back and back and back. And I think when you and your head teachers came and made representation to us, you couldn't make it any clearer what your question was of the administration. Anything you want to add to that, Councillor Andre?
Just to say, to reassure, you will get the written response. We do have next steps going forward, and we will be giving an update very shortly. And we'll make sure that all interested parties are copied in. And hopefully that will answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Pickard.
Can I just point out that this has been almost another academic year since this issue was brought to this committee, and that's another year of this issue perpetuating itself to the detriment of the education of children on this island. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Richards. I should hope point noted. Thank you. Ms. Pickard.
Okay, thank you very much. So I stand here again to ask a very similar question as previously. My name is Sam Pickard, and again, the question is regarding the school closure and the subsequent U-turn. As I said last time, I'm the father of 2 children who go to Cowes Primary and the husband of a wife who works there. Following on the announcement, just after half term, when the students and the teachers are supposed to be relaxing and recuperating, I had my daughter, aged 10, who was incandescent with rage, my son, aged 8, who was crying because he thought he might miss sports day, and my wife, anxious, because she wasn't sure if she had a future job. Then later in the same week, a U-turn was announced. As has been before in this room, the damage has been done. The timing of the proposal and the subsequent U-turn at best seems incompetent and at worst seems calculated, announcing the day when teachers cannot look to find alternative employment, with a review in September after the heat had been taken out of the announcement and proactive parents have moved school, undermining the school's viability. I know that parents are now actively looking to move their children out of Kyle's primary. And therefore, again, I say the damage has been done, to coin a phrase. I understand the process, or I want to understand the process followed here, not the proposal, but the process on how this was handled. How did the Hampshire office advise, and how did the council make its decision on the proposal, the timings, and the subsequent U-turn? Half terms have been ruined, schools have been undermined, and I believe communities permanently damaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickard. Councillor Andre first.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight and for speaking and expressing your concerns, which, as you can imagine, I am very well aware of and I take on board. I'd just like to pick up on one particular point that you said, which we are going to be addressing, which is about process. And I do take on board that there has been perhaps not enough information on process. And to that end, I will be issuing an update very shortly that I hope will reassure that the process, that will explain the process that was followed. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both, because you, not meaning it's sat up, you're quite opposite ends of where this is coming from. And I think it is quite unsatisfactory for both parties at this point in time. So I appreciate entirely what you're feeling. So that will be very high on our agenda to make sure that's resolved. Thank you both. Okay, progress on outcomes and recommendations from previous meetings. Not massive amounts there. It was just, if you look on page 13 and 14, wherever that is. It was young carer support. The draft Isle of Wight carers strategy following review be submitted to committee for comment, and that was shared with us at March and fed back any comments. So that's where we are on that. So moving on, jumping up the order, the SACRE annual report. Who is delivering the SACRE annual report?
Yes, I am Chair, Justine Ball.
Hi, Justine, thank you.
Okay, so I hope you can hear me well there. I'm going to spend a short amount of time producing a summary of the report, which has already been sent to the committee. Before I do that, if I don't know all of you, my name's Justine Ball. I'm the Hampshire County Inspector for RE and History. I'm also the advisor to the Island SACRE, and I have been the advisor for a few years now. And I've been involved with training on religious education and collective worship on the island for over 8 years now. I'm going to share my screen. I've only got 3 slides which summarise the report for you. So very short. So firstly, I'm going to take it in the order that the report is in, and people on the committee, I hope, will have the report there. Firstly, the question that many people ask me quite a lot is, what does a SACRE actually do? And there's national guidelines for that, and I've taken a short summary here and produced it. A SACRE is made up of volunteers, actually, so it's important to stress that, who give their time and their expertise across many areas to advise the local authority on all matters related to agreed syllabus religious education and collective worship. So that's probably the first thing I'd point out to people, is that for religious education, RE, it's the only curriculum subject where we don't look at the national curriculum, because the law for RE predates that. So we look to the syllabus for our legal framework. So its role is advisory, and it concentrates on only 2 things, RE and collective worship. As such, it has to produce every year an annual report on what it's done and what actions it's taken. So the annual report is always written around the end of August, going on towards Christmas, to reflect and review on the work that's been done. When that report is written, it goes to the SACRE to have a look at, and they add their comments and it gets put together, and then it comes to you. It will then go on to the Department for Education, who collate all the SACRE annual reports right across England. So I don't know how many they have. Interesting question, that one. It could be 80, 100, I suppose. There are over 150 SACREs in England alone. It goes to the DFE and it goes to a national body that we call NASACRE. It's the National Association of SACREs. And they look for common themes, common things that we can talk about, and things that might inform our work for the following year. So our island SACRE is supported really ably by a local authority clerk, and we're very glad about that. It has me as a professional advisor, and it meets 3 times a year, once each term, and it also has a small group that looks in more detail about RE, about Ofsted reports, about school visits, about training, anything really. A smaller group that meets before the main SACRE, and that also meets 3 times a year. So what I've just done is summarise that page on what is a SACRE. The words from the chair there you can read, but it gives you the background to then go on to the overview, which is about 4 pages in. And again, I won't read the report out. I'll just summarise what's in there for you. Key highlights then. That's always a good thing to just focus on with any report like this. What was the flavour of the year? Thing to remember for this one, it is about the academic year, August 2021 to about July 2022. What was happening for the SACRE in this period? And that's the report, and that's what it focuses on. So the first thing to say is an enormous piece of work was done in this year, because we had a review of the syllabus, Living Difference, and it became Living Difference 4 in this year. It was adopted by the Island SACRE in October 2021. That is not a quick thing. It has to be thoroughly reviewed, it has to be read, it has to be discussed, and actually legally we have to convene a separate agreed syllabus conference which opens consultation and which closes it. And the Island SACRE was really fully involved. You'll notice that on the screen there, that syllabus covers Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton. So the SACRE members all got together and worked with the other local authorities and looked at reviewing the syllabus. And they asked a wide variety of people about that and came together to agree it and accept it October 2021. That's a legal process because by law, every 5 years, we have to review the syllabus. So 2026 will be our next process for reviewing. During this year, once we'd adopted it, we had to then do a lot of training for teachers, senior leaders, anyone really involved in schools. And we did 3 large launch conferences for that, which is detailed really on the page in about adoption of the locally agreed syllabus. It's under the heading SACRE Advice to Statutory Bodies. So we did 3 large launch conferences. There were around 100, 150, 200, I think we had at one, of teachers and leaders right across schools, and they were online. So it was easy for island people to come online and to hear the training. So that was a massive part of this year. We also went back to what we've always been doing, surveys, just to check on how is collective worship going in schools, how is religious education going. And there is a short survey that I issued to schools on withdrawal. Many of you might know the law on withdrawal. It is a parental right to withdraw. It's been in place for many, many years. Parents have the right to withdraw their children from all of or parts of collective worship and the same for RE. The survey showed really very few children withdrawn. Nearly all children attended. So that was really good for us to know. It was also good that when asked, schools knew the reasons for that and were very clear on it. So we intend to do that going forward too. Part of that survey as well, we asked about what other help might you need for your RE and collective worship. We received very positive comments back on the Hampshire help with RE from myself and others, and also from the diocese as well. So that is worth noting. A key highlight as well for members actually was the chance to join in national training. That really hasn't happened in previous years because the national body has only just started doing training sessions for all SACREs, and our members have attended several of those, including the national conference each year, and that's been really good to get the island voice onto national conversations. So those were the key highlights really from the main body. I'm going to go on to advice given to schools because I've summarised that really as training and support for schools, which is on this slide here. We have a lot of support for RE and collective worship for schools. And I have a good working relationship with schools where they can ask for other things and we'll consider that and put it on. So the basis of this is that we have regular termly online network meetings for RE leaders. We have those for both primary and secondary. And in those, we receive feedback on the syllabus, feedback on RE areas that people need help with. And we also discuss best practice for teaching and curriculum with the locally agreed syllabus. We look at Ofsted requirements, of course. We look at assessment, monitoring and ongoing review of the syllabus. And our focus is on RE as a taught academic subject and how we can raise standards within that, as well as looking at collective worship too, which is part of our remit. So our advisors, myself and Chris May, who's the secondary advisor, we work closely with schools on a one-to-one basis. Via email, we can do face-to-face visits and training in schools, and we do have free regular RE e-news. And I will say that any of these things that I've just mentioned so far, we regularly ask SACRE members to come on and help with, such as visits to schools, such as coming along to networks and talking about their religion or tradition. The SACRE is made up of 4 groups. Group A is religious denominations and non-religious. Group B is the Church of England. Group C is teachers and Group D is the local authority, which makes for a really diverse group of people and has lots and lots of resource there in people to come and help teachers with things like visits, coming into the classroom and working with the teacher and giving their point of view from their own faith or tradition, coming along to networks, coming on visits and seeing what happens in the classroom. So there is a lot there that uses the island SACRE and involves them fully in what we can offer to schools. There is also a lot of free advice and support available for RE. There is an open access RE Moodle. Anybody here can have a look at our RE Moodle, can go on there, can see advice, resources. Regularly, island schools contribute to that. If they've done planning, if they've written small plans for a unit or longer plans over a year, we put those on the Moodle so that it's free for other schools. There's also planning on there that schools can get free. And as part of the support, the Island SACRE also subscribes to a second website, the Hampshire RE Curriculum website, which gives extra advice, planning and resources. So there is a lot there that's freely available. We have a learning and development centre in Hampshire, but we work closely with the Island Centre at Thompson House but to help schools buy packs or further resources at subscribers' rates. And we work closely with them on a termly basis to do that. So those were my 3 slides to just summarise what's in the report. The report gives more detail, and at the back of the report, there is a list of members of the SACRE, so you can see how diverse it is. And I would just add that those SACRE members have given years of service, many of them. They love the SACRE, they support it fully, and they've been on their years going out to schools and providing advice too. And finally, at the back, there is an action plan for the SACRE, which we always look at each year. And on a rolling basis, we add to it going forward each year. So I'll stop there and welcome any questions, please.
Thank you, Justine. That was very thorough. Do we have any questions? Councillor Outlaw and then Councillor Downer.
Hello?
Yes, can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, very quick question, and maybe it's something that everybody knows, but what's an RE Moodle?
Good question. Thank you for that. An RE Moodle is simply a website. Why we called it a Moodle many years ago, I'm not quite sure, but it's a place where teachers know of and can go. You can look at it yourselves and see, and it's a collection of resources to help with teaching RE and collective worship. It'll have planning on there. It'll have suggestions for lessons, has the syllabus itself. You can find that freely available. So I'd say in summary, it's a collection of resources for people.
Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask if the number of religions in the report, how much time is spent on teaching about those religions, and is it equal amount for each one? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So the law for England is that schools will teach, it calls in the main Christianity while taking account of other principal religions. So that's the law. It's been there for decades there. In terms of schools, we work with schools to say, okay, you've got your RE curriculum to plan. How are you going to plan that? How can we take account of the main religions and also humanist traditions, which is non-religious traditions? There's a lot of humanist resources out there from the Humanist Association that schools find very helpful. So planning it, therefore, we look at 6 units of RE, 1 each half term, and we look at what might they teach on Christianity. We ask them that they study a religion in depth across a couple of years. So perhaps year 1 and year 2 will do a religion in depth. And it gives them a chance too to have a look at a light touch into a religion. So in terms of how you plan it, we work with the schools to think of how might we plan several units on perhaps a Jewish tradition or a Buddhist tradition. And we also talk about who's the cohort of children in the school. Are there religions or traditions that we might want to reflect when planning the curriculum? Because remember, this is the syllabus framework rather than the national curriculum, and it embraces fully a local context and also towns and cities nearby where we might have more diversity. So it gives full scope for that. They've got a set of principles that they work with to then plan their own curriculum in a school.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you, Justine. You may stand up. Feel free to stay on for the rest of the meeting, but if you do disappear, we won't blame you. Same goes for members of the public. If you did want to dip out, feel free, but you are welcome to stay. Moving on then to item 6, performance and budget. Who's got that one this time?
Chairman, I'll start that if I may. Thank you. So good evening, members. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I always enjoy the challenge and debate of Scrutiny Committee. And just to remind you, I'm Stuart Ashley, Director of Children's Services. I'm going to do a few slides. We're going to go at pace. and then I will hand over to Steph, our Deputy Director, and she will take you through the rest. Just picking up on Chairman, your point at the beginning, there are some very detailed reports tonight. They are annual reports, and we are duty bound to provide that level of detail. Officers will be succinct when they go through them. And on that note, I shall walk us through our performance for Q4. So the headlines: demand continues to rise in the main, although in one of the slides I'll show you, actually we've seen a slight reduction, and we'll perhaps talk about that. Positively, there's been an improvement in recruitment and retention. The service has been under pressure, as all children's social care services are across the country. The recruitment and retention of social workers is a national challenge, but we have made some changes. We've increased the market supplement, and we've introduced a new role of a senior social worker, and that has had some positive response for us. We've also started to introduce a role called family practitioners, and that's in response to the independent review of children's social care that suggests that you might want to start looking at this. Together with colleagues in Hampshire, we had been ahead of the curve on this, so we've been able to roll out this family practitioner post, and that's immediately brought some capacity to our child assessment and safeguarding teams, which I have to say was well overdue. So that's a really positive summary from me. If we look at contacts then, so these are people that phone into the MASH and email into the MASH with queries. You can see the overall trend. The numbers continue to go up. Q4 was the highest we'd ever had. However, as in the next slide, that didn't necessarily translate into referrals. You can see for the first time in a while now, it started to dip. Now we do have slight ups and downs, but that for me is significant, because what it means is that people that are making contact with the MASH, they're actually not necessarily needing to make contact with the MASH because it's not translating into a referral to children's services. So we're going to do some work to understand what that's about. I suspect, and I suspect it is people being nervous around safeguarding, particularly in schools, because we know that Ofsted have criticised some schools where they haven't referred, not everything, but haven't referred rather than make any decision themselves as professionals. Ofsted had encouraged schools to just refer things into MASH. Not something we agree with, something we've raised with Ofsted. And again, I think is increasingly an issue across the country. So we'll explore that and come back with some detail in due course. Performance around the timeliness of our assessments, it's gone down by 1 or 2%, but overall I have to say we are one of the top performing authorities in the South East region. Next slide, please. So numbers of children on child protection plan continues to go up. My analysis of that would be it's a concern, and I hope to see it plateau. It's been very up and down over the last couple of years, and that is absolutely the consequence of the pandemic, lockdowns, and now what we see, of course, is children with mental health issues. We have adults with mental health issues. There's a lot of stress and strain in families currently, added to by the cost of living crisis, and if I talk about social uncertainty with the war in Ukraine. So we are seeing the stress and strains on families. We can't avoid that, but we do want that number to come down in due course. And the next slide, please. And that really reflects the same pattern as the referrals. For the first time, we've gone up and we've come back down to where I would expect us to be, and that's a really positive situation. And of course, as we have more capacity in the service, so we're able to deliver more effective interventions to keep children safely at home. And at that point, I shall pass over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Chair. As Stuart said, I'm Steph Howe. I'm the Deputy Director for Children and Families, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and I'm just going to whistle you through the next set of slides. The looked after children number, as you can see, it has really remained very stable, and that is probably one of the most significant indications in terms of where we are getting our services right at the right place. Arguably, we would rather have more children on a child protection plan to deal with the work that we need to do with them to make sustainable change in families than have a higher number of looked after children. And what we also know is bringing children into care has far-reaching effect, but it also comes at a significant cost. So for us, this is a really good news story, and we're working very hard to ensure that we only have the right children in public care, and where children can be safely kept at home, they absolutely should be. So a really good news story on that slide. So in terms of caseloads, you will see that we had a slight peak between Q3 and Q4. Caseloads will be becoming very manageable, a slight increase, but again, that will reflect the increase that we've seen in referrals, the increase in complexity. And the positive news about that decrease is that, as you have heard previously in the previous slides, we had a period where we did have some issues in terms of vacancies. And in terms of the increase in caseloads, what we are absolutely confident about through our quality assurance framework, which is very mature and robust, is that that did not indicate children who were not being seen, had not had their initial assessment of need. But what we were aware of was a bulk of children who needed to progress to closure. And in fact, we had a period which shows that dip and that decline back to where we would expect caseloads to be, where we supported the island with some Hampshire staff to just give some relief and pressure to support them with that throughput of closures. So really positive that staffing, recruitment, retention and caseload trajectory is going exactly where we would expect it to be. So these few slides talk a little bit more to some of the narrative that we've already discussed, so I won't go into too much more detail. I've already talked through that slide, so I won't repeat myself. In terms of quality assurance, I have mentioned that we do have a strong, robust quality assurance framework, and it is a quality assurance framework that is across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and we ensure that across both of our local authorities, we are applying the same level of quality assurance to absolutely understand that the service we are delivering to children and families is the best that it can be. So you can see we undertake a number of case files. That's important for us to actually have that real window into practice. And you can see, just to pick out a few points, that evidence that the assessment that we've undertaken has informed the intervention and that we have had a positive input in that family and child's life is at 95%. So again, plays into the fact that we're really confident that we're delivering services at the right level to the right children. Supervision is at 84%. We're doing a lot of work at the moment in supervision to just really understand how we best evidence supervision, because arguably it happens on an informal basis on an ongoing, at an ongoing time. So sometimes when you look in a child's record, that doesn't necessarily reflect, nor should it, some of those discussions that we're having with staff to ensure that they get supervision. So going back to children in care, just a few other little points. I've already mentioned some of the, the performance, and also mentioned how this is a good news story. So 295 children in care on the Isle of Wight at the end of Q4, and that has reduced from 297. A reduction of just 2 is still a really positive number, and something we continue to work with through RAFT, which is our specialist team. We do have a shortage of skilled foster carers. That is a national problem. It is a problem that we have across the whole country, that we are struggling with the demand for children in care as opposed to the supply of skilled foster carers. And particularly on the island as well, which is understandable at some level in terms of the demography, etc. But despite that challenge, we are working really hard to ensure that children who need to be in care have stable placement, and their need to move placements because of placement breakdown is something that we focus on for obvious reasons, putting the child at the centre of what it is that we're doing. So we have a commissioning framework on the Isle of Wight for supported accommodation. So that's young people who are in care and aged between 16 and 17. So for our care experienced young people, and that pathway, the commissioning framework, is called Pathways to Independent. Our current challenge is actually finding providers, accommodation, and the level of support that we consider to be appropriate. And we are struggling with some of that on the island. And it does necessarily mean that sometimes young people who have increasing complex needs, which I know we've spoken about previously, but we are finding that cohort of 16 to 17-year-olds much more challenging in terms of ensuring that they've got the right support and the right level of accommodation for them. So what we know is that the financial cost in terms of placements and supported accommodations is significant. The Pathways framework is about really kind of unifying that, and we're inviting providers to be part of that framework. And at the end of the period, Isle of Wight have 17 children in that age range in supported accommodation. What we're very clear about is that we have to assess and understand that if there are any unregulated placements, we have a framework to really robustly ensure that the needs of children are still met appropriately. That's just a breakdown of some of the accommodation providers, which I won't go through in any detail. It's in your pack, but you can see the way that that is distributed across the period. So Modernising Placements programme, we have a couple of large-scale transformation programmes that originated in Hampshire that we're working very hard to see what the benefits are of some of that programme activity for transformation on the Isle of Wight as well. In short, Modernising Placements is about ensuring that when we do have children who do need to come into care, that they are absolutely in the right provision and that they are receiving the same life experiences. We want any child who's come into care to say to us that it was the best thing that happened for them and their chances were not limited. We're currently doing a big piece of work to stock take what we could look to deliver on the island that we have already successfully achieved in Hampshire. And Debbie Price, who I'm aware is in the room, is working hard on us looking at what it is that we could deliver on the island as well. And at that point, I am going to hand over to Natalie Smith, who's our Assistant Director for Education and Inclusion. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a shorter update from education, but hopefully it will provide you with what you need. Our long updates, of course, are after we get all of the accountability data from the exam seasons in. And as I'm sure you'll be aware, the SATS exams for the end of primary school have completed, and we are towards the end of the GCSEs and the A-levels. Of course, for the students sitting A-levels and GCSEs, the last ones always fall in the period of the festival, which is interesting for them and for the schools. But what a beautiful, beautiful day for it anyway. So the September guarantee, which is the children that are offered a place after they leave secondary school, is really very strong on the island. And we've had the figures in for that, and it's 98.3% compared to a national average of 94.5%. I think this is a good time to mention that there are national concerns, and those are mirrored on the Isle of Wight, about the proportion of children that are remaining in the education that they've received places in post-16. And this is a post-pandemic issue that, of course, we weren't expecting, but we are starting to notice increasingly, and we are starting to think very carefully about how we can support these young people to stay in education. I think it's going to be one of the biggest things facing us, actually, as we move forward. So in terms of our education, health and care plans, it is of great frustration to many parents and children that are in in the process of applying for these that the time taken them to be produced isn't quick. They are not quick documents to produce, and the issues that prevail nationally about getting that level of staff into our SEN service are the same in Hampshire and on the Isle of Wight. Nevertheless, 62% of those plans were produced within the timescale. The national average is lower than that. I think for all of us sitting here thinking about parents and children waiting for those, 62% isn't something to be celebrated. It is of note that it's greater than national, but it indicates the scale of the issue. And we really are focusing significant attention and efforts into getting those plans produced as quickly as possible and to getting the quality of those plans higher over time. Next slide, please. The proportion of schools graded good or better by Ofsted remains at 76%. With the number of schools that there are on the Isle of Wight, each school is worth about 2%. So if we have a number of schools that are Ofsteded in quick succession and requires improvement and go to good, that number goes up very quickly. If we have a number of schools that are good and are regraded as required improvement, that number goes down very quickly. And actually, we are only talking about a small number of schools. We're seeing nationally and on the Isle of Wight particular issues in Ofsted inspections around how parents and children perceive their educational experience to be, and helping to bring parents and children back on board with schools is something that is something that we are engaged with everywhere, and talking to peers in other local authorities, that's the same situation. That's the thing that we need to do to keep those grades going up, to keep them increasing, and we're working very hard on that. There was also a period of time during the pandemic when, in particular, schools where they found it difficult to let staff go out to CPD, which I spoke about when I talked about the outcomes, but that is persisting, and it's very difficult in some of those primary schools to get the improvement in all of the individual subjects that's needed for the curriculum aspect to be judged good by Ofsted. In a smaller school, if a subject leader may have 4 or 5 subjects to look after, compared to a larger school where there might be 2 people looking after one subject, you can see that the scale of the task is really different. So in some cases, it's unsurprising, I think, that it's taken those curriculums longer to get to a place where Ofsted judged them to be good. And that's something else that we continue to work really hard with schools on, but is challenging. The total number of children being electively home educated has gone up. We all know that. We know the reasons for children being electively home educated, and a lot of the reasons are around parents feeling that their children are not in the right mental state to be attending school. There are a lot more children that are at home, as in at home and not going out at all, including to school, than there have been. And we feel very strongly that to support those children to independent teenagehoods and adulthoods, we need to work very hard with those families to try and reintroduce those children into some kind of education and to start getting them back into that routine and looking outwards again. That is a piece of work that we are very successful at that. And as you can see, 95% of the families of children that home educate engage very well with us, compared to 90% at that same point last year. And if those engagement figures are high, then we have access to those children and young people, and we can work with them to help them on that journey towards re-engaging. If we don't have access to them and we don't have eyes on them, then it's very hard to re-engage them, but it's also very hard to know that they are safe. So that figure is a very important one. Next slide, please. So attendance is a national issue, or absence is a national issue. Post-COVID, attendance has remained low nationally and remained low on the Isle of Wight. In fact, the attendance graphs on the Isle of Wight and nationally are exact mirrors of each other. They go in exactly the same direction, with the caveat that although primary attendance on the Isle of Wight is the same as or better than national, and the special schools are superb, they're significantly better than national, the attendance in secondary schools is poor. So we're working very hard with secondary schools to help get those children back in. And it's the secondary school attendance that has pulled the Isle of Wight's overall attendance to being lower than national. Persistent absence is when children attend school less than 90% of the time. The rates are stunningly high, really, on the Isle of Wight compared to national. And again, it's those children that are voting with their feet when it comes to attending school on the regular basis that's needed to get that success in exams. We know from the attendance and the outcomes data last year that the children that attended school regularly, so for more than 90% of the time, did better than the national averages in Key Stage 4 outcomes. So it's a huge priority for us to get them back into school, both for supporting and improving mental health, supporting transition to adulthood, and for getting those really important qualifications that open those doors for them. Severe absence. Once a child is severely absent, which is an absence rate of below 50%, it is much harder to get them back into school. And we've always had systems in place for supporting those children, because there have always been children, some small numbers of children, that find it very difficult to attend. That number has increased. It still looks small, but it's worrying. So we continue our work in that area. In terms of permanent exclusions, it would be preferable to have none. So supporting schools with preventative work, and if a child is permanently excluded, then supporting them to find education in another school if possible is key. Nevertheless, there are children at times that do make choices that end up with permanent exclusions. And at the moment, we have a combined figure of 5. The number of suspensions, and I know that this data it looks old, but actually it takes the DfE a long time to process it, and the data needs to be processed in order for us to know that it's accurate. So the combined number of suspensions, and suspensions is when a child is asked to stay at home or in some different form of education for a day or 2 days, but it's not a permanent thing. The number of suspensions is too high. We're working very hard on that, and the number there was 867 for 2 terms. You can see from that it is going to get much higher than the previous years, but of course the previous years had a period of lockdown in it, so they're not comparable. My final bullet point is just referring back to the attainment report that I brought last time. We haven't had any exam results since, so I'll update you with attainment data when we next get to the point where they're published. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was an excellent summary. Questions from the committee? Any? Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Stewart here. Just to clarify, I mean, thank you for the presentations and all the information. And I'm only too aware of how much work goes into these things, being previously a secondary teacher for a short period of time. Relatively not very good, but I was a secondary teacher. You mentioned the proportion of schools that are graded good or better by Ofsted. What's the national figure?
Are you going to jump in, Stuart?
National figures 88%, I think, Natalie, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, I could see you itching to say that.
It's just something that came up recently. Yeah, 88%. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Secondly, you mentioned the number of children being electively home educated. Again, I think that most people who've got any touch on the education system will be aware that the Isle of Wight is particularly high. Do you have the sort of percentage figures for the Isle of Wight and for the rest of England and Wales? Sorry, what? England?
They are significantly higher. I will get the exact figures to you by the end of this meeting. It is of note that there are two types of elective home education in my mind. There's the ones because the child should be at school, the parents want them to be at school, and there are barriers in the way. But there are also parents that choose philosophically to electively home educate their children, and that is an area which, for better or for worse, the Isle of Wight has a very strong reputation around provision for those children, and actually both sets have gone up. But the ones that we have to worry about as educators are the first set that I spoke about, where there are barriers to them being back in school. It's not a philosophical decision, and we can bring a more detailed report around all of that if people are interested in the future. But I'll get that other figure to you by the end of this meeting.
Thank you for that. That's, I think, something that we're all aware of, those two different cohorts. And over my far too long on the island, I've seen both sides of that. And in school, of course, you do see the result of the effects of various types of home education if children then reappear in the school system. And obviously that impinges on the experiences of them and their cohort. Just as and I won't expect a figure for this, I promise. Do you have any feel for how many of those home educated people or people registered as home educated are what we might call voluntary excluded?
Do you mean children whose parents have chosen for them to stay at home because they're worried that if they go in, they will be excluded?
Sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's at the encouragement of schools.
I would that if schools are caught doing that by Ofsted, they are given an inadequate immediately. And if we get a hint of that and we investigate and we find that that has happened, then we deal with it very strongly. And if we don't feel that schools work with us on it, we will report them to Ofsted. That is unacceptable. Sometimes we follow up incidences that have been reported to us to be like that, and we find that that isn't quite the case. And I'm now going to draw on the whole of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, because that provides an awful lot more examples, and it's much more comfortable to use an example that isn't close to home. But there is a school where that practice was happening, not an Isle of Wight school, and we did end up, unfortunately, having to speak to Ofsted, and Ofsted did inspect, and it did have significant consequences. So that is something that we are very alert to, and it is not acceptable.
That's a very good response to hear. Thank you very much for that. There was one other question which I had. If I can find my notes, I will even ask it. The attendance statistics for the Isle of Wight have always been interesting. I think that's the right word to use. Is there a specific approach on the island that we are undertaking to deal with that particular aspect of attendance in the sort of medium range, you know, the sort of 30-odd% you mentioned, as opposed to the long-term attendance, long-time failure to attend, yeah. Which is a particularly serious problem. It's the middle range, because obviously that includes a large number.
You've hit the nail on the head, actually. I'm always reminding people that the ones that are difficult, we have worked with for a long time, and we will continue to. But what's different now is the ones that aren't difficult. They're the ones that have knocked 5% off all the way through the system. We don't have that issue in primary schools. We don't have that issue in secondary school, in special schools. It's secondary schools. So we had just at the point the pandemic started, we had got the attendance in secondary schools to be just above national. My goodness, that was a moment of celebration. During the pandemic, the attendance in schools, secondary and primary, was better than it was reported nationally, although the attendance figures were poor because all schools were open and welcomed children in. Then very sadly, a teacher at Christ the King died, and that the shockwaves that sent through the Christ the King community are still there with us. That is the school with the we really struggle with attendance there, and that kind of feeling through the system of nervousness around COVID really hit home, and that has prevailed. So one of the things that we need to work with the whole community around is building their confidence and resilience around response to feeling a little bit unwell. That's a strong one. The main thing that we did as a local authority to help kind of get over that barrier was we, before Christmas, set up.
Oh, we've lost Natalie. I don't know if you can carry on that sentence, Stuart.
Absolutely not. Sorry, Chairman, I can't. No, Natalie is our sort of expert in this. I'm sure she'll rejoin us in a second.
Yeah, Natalie's back. Natalie's back.
Ah.
We lost you there for a second, Natalie.
Am I there?
Yeah, you're here. You're with us. You're in the room.
Okay, I thought I was boring you and you were going to tell me to stop.
Yeah, we just switched you off.
Yeah.
We lost the last
Yeah.
bit of your sentence, which was no doubt the most interesting bit. So if you want to recap.
So the inclusion team on the Isle of Wight, Rachel Williams is the star of that, worked with secondary schools, and we got the lists of children whose attendance was below 95, but who were not severely absent for reasons that we were working very hard on. We wrote to all of those children, and we avoided postal strikes and all sorts, with a really positive, encouraging letter reminding them of the importance of good attendance. And we wrote to the children whose attendance was above 98%, celebrating their attendance. So those landed over the Christmas holidays. Then the first week back after the Christmas holidays, secondary schools deployed resources to focus specifically on any absence in the first week back. And the reason that we did that was because there's a lot of recent research, and it has to be recent because the pandemic is recent, that says that if you get them back in that first week after the holidays, their attendance retains better. So we put real focus into that, and it was measurable. And there was a really significant increase in attendance across the island secondary schools as a result of that. So we then repeated it at Easter. The year group that we did this with, because it was very resource intensive, was year 11 for obvious reasons. But we are using that as a pilot, and we are taking the learning from that. And of course, different schools did slightly different things about resource deployment in the first week back. So there's a lot of learning in there across the system, and we are refocusing that into other year groups. So we're being, we work with the DFE attendance advisor, and they have told us that what we are doing on the Isle of Wight is further ahead than they have come across anywhere else. So really, we haven't solved the problem, but we are trying very hard to, and it is chipping away at it. Everything that the people in this room can do around that culture of attendance is also really important. It's resetting expectation that school is something that you go to every day, and that's where we need to go back to.
Thanks, Natalie. Councillor Downer.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Natalie. I'd just like to touch on Ofsted, if I may. Have any representations been made to Ofsted about their prescriptive comments about schools, say like good or outstanding or needs improvement? It doesn't seem to me as though it encourages people. And Ofsted put the fear of anything into people, as you know. Their inspectors, and I know for a fact, are not consistent. Some are not helpful at all. And I'd just like to wonder if there's any representations been made. Also, when a school gets classed as outstanding, I'm given to understand that it's quite a few years before they're inspected again. That doesn't seem very balanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. There was a period of time where outstanding schools were not inspected. That has been revoked, and it's due to that many outstanding schools, I would say most outstanding schools that are now re-inspected, lose their outstanding grade. So they are now being inspected. There is a recognition that schools, now this is a difficult one because I'm about to say schools need inspecting on the one hand, and then I'm going to answer the other part of your question, which I will agree with you about the heavy-handedness of those inspection judgments. So the absence of anything was clearly unhealthy. They are now being routinely inspected. And Rodney, back to the first part of your question, Ofsted is an incredibly blunt tool. So representation has been made loud and clear by, I would say, all organisations connected with schools, including parent bodies, including local authorities, including unions. And due to that, Ofsted this week have published something that softens some of their judgments. For instance, if a school is rated inadequate due to safeguarding, instead of having to wait 3 years on an inadequate judgment, they are now re-inspected within 3 months, and that is incredibly useful in terms of some of the more extreme situations and anxieties and community concerns that we've seen recently. So great questions. I hope I answered them. Back to your first question, Rodney, I think there's still more to do, even with the concessions that Ofsted have made. But we are all united and we all speak with one voice, I think, everyone in that chamber and all of us on this call, in terms of our very respectful representations to them.
Just a little supplementary, if I may, with these representations that you've been making, and let's hope it leads to better teacher retention, because that's the thing you're up against and all the stress that they're under. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart. Oh, sorry, Stuart. Sorry, Stuart. Ashley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add, of course, I absolutely support the removal of one-word judgments for schools, but I'm going to say this, aren't I? I also fully support it, the removal of children's services judgments as well. A one-word judgment on a local authority children's services, claiming it to be inadequate, it can last for a decade. And in some ways, the Isle of Wight knows that through bitter experience over the last 10 years. So I'm fully in favour of one-word judgments around local authorities being removed as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'd all agree with that. So we're nearly over, but as you know, I always like to keep it going for a little bit longer. You'll all be aware that the last question I always ask is 2 questions. One, where's the handbrake? Where's the bad news? So I'll come to the handbrake in a minute. Anybody that wants to offer a handbrake to moving forward. Bad news I've got for you is on the EHCP process. Now, Natalie, you alluded to 62% not being something to celebrate. Worse than that is we are top of the league table in the country for refusal to assess. So we're the worst in the country for refusal to assess. Out of 253 applications, 114 were refused to assess. Now, to me, in terms of process engineering terms, that's a process that's totally outside of its capability. I don't necessarily expect you to answer now because I think it's a very lengthy answer. But what I am saying is we aren't going to be top of that league this time next year, are we?
Well, the Isle of Wight is different to many other local authorities because many more parents put in for EHC assessments than school staff. So when school staff put EHC plans in for assessment, the no to assess rate is about average. But when parents put them in, the no to assess rate is high, but that's not a bad thing. It means that the moderation process that is gone through is meaning that we are not getting EHCs agreed into the system inappropriately. So there's a number of parents that want their child to have an EHC plan, but they do not meet the threshold. And in those cases, it's absolutely right that there's a no to assess. So I think what we need to do is to continue with our work to increase parental confidence in the schools being able to meet the needs of their children without them applying for an EHC plan. And then we won't get so many EHC plan applications from parents that are nowhere near the threshold. And then our no to assess figures will go down. And of course, what that will do, because it takes a lot of time for a board to read all the papers, to read the submissions and to decide no. So that's taking time away for SEN specialists from working with SEN children. So the whole thing, you're absolutely right that that is not a statistic to be proud of. But in my view, it's for a slightly different reason. And when the no to assess is about the same as national, I hope it's because the number of plans that are submitted that are, borderline, should they be, shouldn't they be, is more akin to national rather than this surge of EHC plans that are coming in that are nowhere near the threshold and the child's needs can be met by ordinary available provision. Ordinary available provision is what should be in place in the classroom to meet the needs of all the children in it.
Okay, in terms of appeals, 97% of appeals find in favour of the parent, so that doesn't stack up. But of the 100, I'm prepared to accept what you say. Of those 114 no to assess, how many of those would you say were parent referrals?
It's of the no to assess, I would probably say about 70–80%.
Okay, I won't
Chairman,
for a number there.
Can I just come back? Could I just come back on the appeals? Nationally, successful appeals for parents run at 93%, and that actually there's something wrong with the system where there's a 93% success rate. If that was the criminal justice system, we'd say it was flawed, and as professionals, we would say we think the appeal process is flawed.
Okay, in terms of the no to assess number, I won't put you on the spot, Natalie. I know that's not fair, but a number I think would be useful at some stage. And as I said earlier, I'm going through the process, is I can identify with some of what you say, but going through the process is quite painful and it doesn't match the experience that maybe that you'll be explaining, but we can talk about that separately. But the marker I'm putting down is we don't want to be, if we think we know the answers to that, we don't want to be top of that chart this time next year, because EHCPs seem to be a very fundamental part of children with additional needs making it through school. So I won't labour that point any further. One last thing is the statistics on caseload average for social workers says the average is 24, 25, where it is, but it doesn't tell the full story. Again, I'm not expecting a full answer from this, but as Steve Crocker used to say quite candidly, no, it doesn't. If I stopped a social worker here now and said, does that represent what happens in your day-to-day life? They'd say, no, it doesn't. I'm snowed under. Where are we going? And again, you don't have to have this in full now, but how confident are you that you're going to be where you want to be in terms of that handbrake's released by this time next year?
I'll answer that, and Steph, like Steph to join. But we are where we want to be now, or thereabouts. I have to say, the introduction of the family practitioners means that social workers haven't had to have such high caseloads, because some of the lower level cases, perhaps lower level support, nothing to do with child protection or looked after children, just a very low level support that can be worked by other differently qualified workers, our family practitioners. So our social workers caseloads have come down. They're a little bit high in children in care, and I'm fairly certain that's because we're in the recruitment process I think it was 2 posts. But we are in a much better position. The 24-25 was quarter 4. That's not the case now, Chairman. I'm absolutely certain of that, because every 2 weeks I look at the caseloads myself.
Yeah, I would agree. I look at them weekly as well, and they have come down. Sometimes the averages fluctuate a little bit and can be a little bit higher when a team is on what we call intake. So they will take all of the new cases that come out of the MASH for that 1 week. So it can slightly inflate on certain weeks. particularly, if we've got schools that are about to close, or there is a particular issue in terms of staffing at that time, because we take the whole average. But I absolutely agree with Stuart. The family practitioners and their ability to hold certain types of cases, we will continue to see having a significant impact, but they're relatively new and we have to train them properly and support them and give them a gradual caseload that is an appropriate caseload to receive.
Excellent, thank you for that. Thank you all for that. It's again, a very in-depth report, much appreciated. I appreciate the time you put into it. Moving on then, item 7, fostering annual reports. Who's providing us with a fostering annual report?
Chair, that'd be me. I'm Kev Brown. I'm the Acting Service Manager for Children in Care. And I have with me Bernie Farmer, the Team Manager for the service, who wrote the report. We will not go through the whole report. It's very brief. You've all seen it. So we will go through some of the highlights, and at the end there are opportunities if anyone has any questions for us. Just to start with then, between 22 and 2023, we recruited and approved 7 new foster carers. And as of the end of March, we had 81 registered and approved foster carers on the Isle of Wight, with 7 general carers and 2 connected carers in assessment. Our target for 23-24 is to recruit 10 new foster carers on the Isle of Wight. Moving on, we have marketing activities. We started back again last year, face-to-face ones in some events throughout the Isle of Wight. There is a plan to increase that this year. We found also that we jumped on the back of the John Lewis Christmas advert, and Bernie got involved with John Lewis on the Isle of Wight. We now have a stand up there, and they've been very supportive of us. We've been advertising some of our participation activities. It's gone in local media, on a press release. And the good news story seems to be gaining some positive attention. Foster carers given praise for the services that they provided, and the word of mouth has been very positive, and we've getting some referrals from there. What Bernie has done in her team is that she's been providing activities in competitions for the foster carers. That's also included their birth children. So it's a whole household event, which foster carers are very much appreciated. We have inquiries on from their digital platform that's providing some positive results. They found that some of the information is quite hard if you want to make inquiries online. And I will come on to that in a minute, but it's not been a simple process. The Isle of Wight took part in the South East Regional Fostering Forum Mystery Shopper exercise. This is now in its 6th year that we've been doing this. Out of 24 local authorities and the independent fostering agencies that took part in that, the Isle of Wight came out as a 3rd highest average score. Some issues noted for that was accessibility of the website. Some of the information came back. They said that while the information provided was clear, it was quite basic. Other issues was if people wanted to make online inquiries, feedback was that entering the information was quite laborious, requires a lot of personal information being put down, when actually they would prefer just to enter an email address and ask for an information pack to be sent. So that's something we're going to be looking at. So while the Isle of Wight upgraded the website and its launch, it still doesn't enable the fostering service to have the platform that it needs to be competitive, especially in relation to other recruitment agencies that we're also, in competition with. So this is something else that we need to explore further. Just to give some context, our fostering service is made up, we have 3 hubs. We have the recruitment and the assessment of foster carers hub. the support hub and the adoption and the special guardianship. Recruitment assessment will include our marketing apprentice, focus on marketing and doing the initial viability assessments with childcare social workers. The team manager will attend our placement meetings. We have these 3 times a week. These are chaired by myself. Bernie as team manager attends, the commissioning team attend, childcare team manager attends, and our leaving care team manager attends. What we do is any young child or leaving care that young person requires a placement, we discuss these in depth. What we're very careful is that we need to do careful matching. What we want to do is ensure that we place the right children in the right placement with a carer that's going to be able to meet that child's individual needs. So we will have lots of discussions between all of us about which carer would be more appropriate, which carer may be able to offer respite. We've seen the positive impact on that because the stability for our children is actually very low. We do exceptionally well in this area. Our children are settled. They tend to stay in the same placement for significant periods of time. By splitting the team into 3 areas, this enables each part of the hub to focus on their level of specialism. It improves our performance, it improves our timescales, and it enables for a much better service to our foster carers. While our target for recruitment for our foster carers did fall short of what we would have liked, we have to put it in the context. Bernie attends the South East Regional Forum for Fostering, and what we are clear is actually the Isle of Wight into the same issues that other local authorities are experiencing nationally. This is not a specific issue to the Isle of Wight. What we are anticipating is that working with our colleagues in Hampshire and taking the learning from their modernising placement agendas, we can take the learning from Hampshire and bring that to the island for what would work best for the Isle of Wight. And we are very grateful for that. What we're also looking is within the modernising placement agenda, is looking at our resources, it's looking at how we can increase foster carers, it's looking at how we can support foster carers better. And I know our area director, Debbie, is working very closely with Hampshire on that. What we do know is that foster carers are experiencing the same issues, the same concerns as the general public. The cost of living crisis is obviously having an impact, issues within Ukraine, and also we're still dealing with the impact of coming out of the pandemic and coming out of lockdown and how that's impacted on people. What Bernie and our team are planning this year is a full activity of being out in the community, doing events, trying to raise the awareness of foster carers and attract people to consider foster care as a journey for them that we can support them to take. We're also exploring different marketing areas. We're looking at maybe accessing adverts on the ferries and on the tourist attractions on the Isle of Wight. Anything we can do to make ourselves known to the people on the island and encourage them to consider this. There's 2 parts when we look about foster carers and doing assessments. There's 2 parts of this. One is from the initial inquiry, we do the initial checks, we gather the initial references, and then that leads on to part 2, which is actually the full assessment. What we're doing to reduce the timescales is that they're now doing both parts at the same time. Just to give some data, around 22-23, we had 57 inquiries. That resulted in 31 initial visits, which led to doing 12 fostering assessments, and out of that, we approved 7 general foster carers. So that gives us a conversion rate of 12.2%. Fostering Hub continues to support foster carers, provide supervision. We are pleased to say our performance in that area is very strong now. They're doing now various support groups for our foster carers, which includes monthly lunch and learn sessions, light bite sessions. We've got connected carers groups and move on to adoption group. And we deliver training, which includes the skills to foster, fostering changes, attachment, safeguarding, etc. We're doing hybrid, Bernie and her team are doing hybrid training. It's face to face, and also foster carers can join online. This is to encourage a greater participation for all our carers. We have carers spread not just on the island, we have carers spread on the mainland. We've got one in France. So it enables foster carers who can't physically get here in person but can join in as part of the training. We took part in the annual foster survey. The take up was low, despite Bernie and her team offering various incentives to foster carers to complete this, especially around Christmas with the Christmas events. They have their target was surveys mean prizes, and all carers was encouraged to complete the survey prior to leaving the event. We had 26 participants in the survey. That sample size is not a representation that we could give full credit to what people were saying, but from the feedback, generally very positive. And surprisingly, unsurprisingly, 42% said they were satisfied with the fostering allowance. Flip side of that will be 58% wouldn't have been satisfied. With some of the comments being that the fostering allowance perhaps needs to take into consideration cost of living crisis and that everything is going up. So that is something that we could possibly be exploring within our modernising placement programme. But on the findings, 90% of our foster carers that responded felt that they didn't have children that was placed outside of their approval, and they didn't have children placed with them that they did not feel equipped to care for. Yeah. Hampshire and the Isle of Wight approach is embedded within our service. All our supervision notes and our household reviews are written in a strength-based way. There's still work to be done on maybe changing some of the current forms to promote this across the service. And we're starting changing some of our language to make it less stigmatizing. Our children in care do not go on respite, they now go on sleepovers because that's what children that live with families do. And we don't have exit interviews, we have farewell conversations just to make it more strength-based. Move on. We have 12 fostering panels a year, held monthly. Myself, Bernie, and the chair of the panel, we meet every quarter to discuss any issues. A training day was arranged for panel members and included the fostering service hubs, which was very positive. As part of the fostering panel, we are trying to recruit a care experienced young person to be part of that panel. We think that will start from September. I'm not going to go into performance around reviews, but just to say our performance generally remains strong. We did look at the number of foster carers that resigned over the last 12 months. There were 24. What we was looking at is that if we had additional resources, if we had additional staffing, if we could do things differently for whatever reason, out of that 24, could we have prevented some of those being that stopped them being from resigning? I think to put some context around it, at 24, there was a carer that was granted a special guardianship order and didn't physically have any spare rooms to continue her fostering. Several children were returned from connected carers and returned home to parents, which was a positive. It's what we would expect. We had a couple of carers that moved to the mainland and was retiring, and we had a couple that were under investigation and resigned. They still went to panel with the outcome being that they were deregistered. We identified around about 5 carers that we thought, if we could have had a resource that we don't have, but we could put something together, we thought there's probably about 4, possibly 5 carers we may have prevented from resigning, which would have equated to about 23%. But just to summarise, I mean, I think it's fair to say over the last year, the fostering service have had challenges with staffing, same as across our service. They are no different. But I think it is to their credit that they continue to perform well. The morale in the team is very positive. They pull together, they work exceedingly hard. And I think Bernie has to take the credit for that as well as a team manager. So in conclusion, we know our part of the service, we know the strengths, we know the areas that we need to focus on over the next year, and we have a plan in place that's how it's going to address those outstanding actions. If I can be of any further help to anyone.
Thank you, Bernie, as well, for being the unsung hero of ours. From experience, I know just how difficult it is, the foster care system, and well done. It's not easy, and I don't think, even with a million magic wands, I don't think you'd get everything you ever need. So there's a lot of hard work gone into that. And the thing around allowances, I'm sure, will keep you awake at night, because there is no easy answer to that. Any questions from anyone on the committee? Hello.
Yep, it's working this time. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. One is with regard to the recruitment of, what's the opposite of recruitment, actually. You mentioned you wish to try and recruit 10 new foster carers. Obviously, I assume there's some kind of churn and you are losing foster carers as well. Have you got an idea of an average of how many that you're losing each year? And the second question is related to the figure for a family link household. I noticed that that's been 0 for the last 2 years. I'm not sure how far that goes back, but I assume that there is a need for that. And if there is, then what steps are you doing to try and address that?
If I can take your first point, the counter argument to recruitment is the deregistrations that Kev was going through. And we're looking actively at ways within that modernising placements agenda to address, is there any further work? What can we do to retain carers and take more of a proactive approach to retaining them and keeping them? So we are doing that. 10 is about an average what we would expect from our demographic over on the island. 10 is only a target for me. It's not where we stop. That should be where we start and we stretch. So that's where the team's at. I have 10 in here. My team have 15 in their head. And that's the kind of way we want to keep working with them. In answer to your point about Family Link, Family Link was a system that was set up a while back before I actually joined the team. And it's a national programme in terms of having specific carers who deliver ongoing respite regularly to families who have a child with a disability. So it's almost like that. We haven't specifically recruited to that because that system was it wasn't equal to the fostering care service that we had, i.e. they weren't treated in the same way. We now have respite carers coming in who have that not only specialism with children with disabilities, but other children, but we class them as respite sleepover carers. So we are providing the service, but what we are doing is redesigning it, and that will also become part of the modernising placements agenda in looking at how we, rather than have a separate service, why do we have a separate service for children with disabilities? They should have the same service as everybody else. So it's about looking at how we are more inclusive in our approach. So my hope is that next year that will go off of the report. That would be lovely. Okay.
Any further questions? No, excellent. Thank you for that report. Let's get you to turn your microphone up as well. Thank you. Moving on then to number 8, adoption annual report. Who's taking that?
That's me. I don't know whether you want to start, Bernie or Kev, or whether you just want to go straight to me for Adopt South, which is absolutely fine. I will do that then. So my name's Rachel. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm the head of Adopt South, which is the regional adoption agency for Hampshire, the Isle of Wight, Southampton and Portsmouth. We've now finished our 4th year, which I'm really pleased to tell you all that it has been a very strong year again, and we've just started our year 5. I just thought I'd go through the highlights, if that's okay. And of course, please do ask me any questions at the end. So at the Isle of Wight, we've seen some increased numbers from children needing adoption this year, so 83% increase. Numbers are still small, but certainly they've gone up from, it was 6 last year and 11 this year. So that's when the children's plans that are submitted to court for a plan for adoption. And in keeping with that, placement orders have also increased. So that's when the court give that permission to actually place that child for adoption. They've increased too. It was 6 again last year and 10 this year. And in line with that, we've actually linked more children formally for adoption. So an 80% increase. It was 5 last year and it's 9 this year. Adoption orders have slightly just decreased. That's more about court time though. So the court have allocated bi-monthly hearings for adoption orders, but we've just heard that that's changed. It's gone back to when the need is. So we're pleased about that because that was causing some delay in children being adopted. One of the island's children was over the age of 5. So good news is that we were able to find a placement and a permanent family for that child. And really good news for the island too, that scorecard 2 and scorecard 2 from the point of being given the permission from the court to place the child to the point that we find and match and they're linked to panel. The government give us 121 days, which is very tight, but the average for the island was 129 days, so just 8 days over. So that was good news. Thank you, Jenny. If I could just go back a bit, I'm sorry, I should have introduced you to Jenny. Jenny is one of our Adopt South service managers, and she is in, she oversees the stage 2 part of assessment, family finding and matching, and also Hampshire Children's Team, which has come in scope as a pilot into Adopt South. So this just really shows a little bit about how our year and how strong it's been. We've had 763 inquiries. Our target was 708, so we achieved that and plus a bit more, and that's also more than last year as well. So we were really pleased about that. There are 32 REAs altogether, and we all joined in REA mystery shopping store. So it sounds a bit like what Kevin's just said for fostering, and we came up the top with 93%. So we were really pleased with that and how quickly we answered the phone and what information we gave and what customer service we gave. So we were really pleased. Those from the inquiry, we had 508 families go on to find out more through one of our adoption information sessions. 201 then registered their interest to want to go further. And out of those, we actually had 185 families that went forward to be assessed. And we approved 94 last year. Again, we were pleased with that. Slightly lower, it was 101 the year before. But we've been deliberately looking at families coming through. We know that our children are older. They're more often now part of a sibling group, and generally children with more complex needs. And so we've really been targeting families that can offer not more than perhaps just a young child, but who can take a child with trauma and who is older and more likely to have some challenging needs as they grow up. 39% were approved out of those 94 for sibling groups, 26 for fostering for adoption. Fostering for adoption is early permanence, so it's when we're fairly confident, and of course we don't know what the court will say, and we never want to preempt a court decision. But fostering for adoption allows us to place the child with a possible adopter who will stay there if a placement order is granted. But it just means that we miss out the fostering bit so that they can actually stay in a family in the long term rather than have to be moved. We're pleased with our inquiry to assessment rate, which was good. We set ourselves a target of 20% and our conversion rate for inquiry to assessment was 24%. As part of our income target, we sold, for want of a better word, 4 adopters who felt it was right for them to take children outside of the region. And that doesn't mean to say that they didn't want to necessarily take our children, but they felt that a match somewhere else was better for them. And that allowed us, with that money, to plough back into our own service and to really support our own adopters. But with that, we appointed a couple of parenting practitioners who could really support our adopters who were going to take sibling groups, knowing that we need to give them that more support than perhaps those that take a younger or a single child. We're really pleased with our assessment timescale. So the government gave us 2 months to do stage 1 and 4 months to do stage 2. Our overall adoption journey was 5 months altogether, and the government gave us 6 months. We're the only REA that achieved stage 1 and stage 2 in government timescale. So again, we continue to be really pleased with that. We approved the adoption support fund. The adoption support fund, it was just over £1 million that we had approved, and that's been able to give us so much to our adopters in the form of therapy and support that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So that made a real difference. Since we started, in the last 4 years, we've actually been able to, we've had just under 3 million approved. So again, that's made a real difference to what we could have done without that. We've managed to sell some of our therapeutic courses and have an income of just under 50,000. The next bit is just a little bit about how many children we've had families identified. And out of those 228 children, 13 of those come from the island, and 124 were hard to place last year. And what I mean by hard to place is older children over the age of 5, sibling groups, and children with complex needs. And I've just referred to my notes, it was 9 from the island that were hard to place out of those. 119 children were formally linked, and that was 9 from the island. 38 sibling groups we found families for. 20 of those children were over the age of 5, and 1 was from the island, as I mentioned before. We placed 26 children in fostering for adoption placements. 2 of those were Isle of Wight children, and 9 children. We ended our year with just 9 children we didn't have any potential links for. 3 of those were island children. Now, I know that feels high, but it was a sibling group of 3. And I understand that we've now potentially found a family for them, which is really good news for them. We've placed just 2 children externally out of 119, and they were Isle of Wight siblings actually, but very low external purchase. So 117 children were placed in-house last year. And overall, we had a really strong scorecard 10, which is from looked after to when a child is matched with their permanent family. And the government give us 426 days to do that. We were just 7 days over as an average of 433. Thank you, Jenny. I'll just bring out some highlights here. So since we started the last 4 years, we formally linked 438 children. We've approved 433 adopters. As I've said, our scorecard, our stage 1 and stage 2 transfers for assessment has been under the government targets, and we've had approved just under 3 million from the Adoption Support Fund. So how do we compare with the other 32 REAs? All local authorities now are part of a regional adoption agency. We approved the 3rd highest number of adopters. Our adopters spent less time than any other REA from the inquiry to stage 1. We were one of just 2 REAs where scorecard 1 was in timescale. We were the only REA who achieved both stage 1 and stage 2 in timescales. Our adopters have the shortest adoption journey, and we had the lowest timescale from placement order to the adoption order. And I think there's just one more, Jenny, from the next slide, which is, and we place more children with in-house adopters than any other REA. Many other REAs are having to go external for many more, some up to 50% of their children. So we were really pleased that we only needed to buy a placement for two, one placement really, but for 2 SIPs. I hope that's been helpful. Can I take any questions?
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, any questions from the panel? We've got silence at the moment. I've got one, and it may just be me not understanding the terminology. And well done to get into year 4. But in year 4, how many children were adopted in that year?
I can quickly tell, altogether or from the island.
Both would be good.
So altogether there were 105, and from the island there was just 3.
Thank you. I know it's in there somewhere, but that saved me a lot of looking.
That's
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I think it's such a detailed report. There'll either be a million questions, or actually every time you're about to answer one, you flick over another page, you go, oh, yep, they've got that. One more call for questions. If not, we'll move on. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Rachel or Jenny, before we move on? Well, thank you both for joining online, and thank you so much.
I'd just like to tell you that.
Carry on. Sorry, Rachel. Oh, you're frozen. That's what's happened. We'll wait for Rachel to come back a minute. There, you're back, Rachel. You're back.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to tell you that we've had some DfE money approved for a multidisciplinary team, which is a project manager and a clinical psychologist and an educational psychologist. We've got the project manager in post. We've got half a ed psych in post. So we're just really excited about that, because I think that's going to make a real difference to what the doctoral support we can offer and how we can support our doctors.
Yeah, well done. I mean, all of those professions you mentioned are very, very rare at the moment. You've done well to find people.
Absolutely.
But again, thank you very much, and thank you for the hard work you're doing. Again, with the fostering team, thank you all. So we'll move on then to item 9, children's social care. Is that you, Deb?
I think you've got the slides in your pack. So I'll just take you through them. Someone able to share the slides? I need to join to share them. Sorry? I think I can.
Debbie, I will, but I'll be sharing them from the pack. So I won't have them in. I'll do my best. So let me try to do it for you. Give me 2 seconds.
Thanks, Stephanie. Much appreciated. We could have been here for weeks.
Thank you. I'll just.
You'll have to tell me if you can see them.
Yes, we can.
That's magic.
Excellent. Okay.
So I'm not going to dwell on this. I know Stuart and Steph have both already talked a bit about family help. So I'll just draw your attention to the slides. So family help is born out, on page 1, family help was born out of the independent review of children's social care report in May 2020. And the government's response, entitled Stable Homes Built on Love, has 6 key pillars. One of those pillars is around family help. So family help brings together targeted early help and children in need. So if we look at the next slide, we can see there it is in pillar 1. So family help is providing the right support at the right time so children can thrive with their families. And we know that that is an area that on the Isle of Wight we've been working on for some time in terms of making sure children get the right support at the right time. If we move on to the next slide, so family help is defined as support that aims to improve children's lives through supporting the family unit and strengthening family relationships. It enables children to thrive and keep families together. So family help is around supporting children in the early help, children in need area, and brings services together so that there isn't as much of a gap between early help and children's services. So if we move on to the next page, we have considered during that time our vision for family help. And what we want to do is to drive that forwards to make sure that we are taking this opportunity to improve outcomes for children and families. So it's around keeping more children safely at home, reducing demand for level 4 services, increasing recruitment and retention within children's services and early help, and locally based family help teams aligned to local resources, such as hubs, as in our family hubs. This will improve services for children and families within their local communities, building trusting and supportive relationships with a range of agencies by reducing transition points, improving family links, and ensuring that families have access to staff which uses the skills of differently qualified staff as well as our social workers. So in phase 1, if we move to the next page, as Steph and Stuart have already discussed, we have already introduced a family practitioner role in our CAST teams. So that has enabled us to use differently qualified workers to work with families alongside the social work teams. Those workers are holding specific children in need cases that have been carefully selected to make sure that those workers are the right people to work with those children and families at that time. And that's proved to be very successful so far. Those workers started with us in March this year. There are 8 workers within the families in the CAST teams working alongside social workers. They are carefully monitored, the work by their team managers and assistant team managers, with us making sure that we support them all the way through to feeding up to assistant director and director level, because obviously this is a new role. So as you can see, it's based on the role of the child practitioner and RAF family workers, roles that we know had worked well in the Isle of Wight Children's Services. They're holding specific families where there's a lower level of risk. We have been, as I say, monitoring them very carefully. That's working very well. And our next phase is to continue that work with making sure that we're doing audits of the cases, of the families that they're working with in the next couple of weeks. And things are going incredibly well. It's helped us to bring those workers in alongside social workers at a time when recruitment is good, and it's enabled us to make sure that the families are with the right worker in the team, which has led us to manage caseloads very well. So in terms of the next page, in terms of early help on the Isle of Wight, as you know, there's a small central coordinating team on the Isle of Wight who quality assess all early help assessments. The wider early help offer is commissioned to Barnardo's, and the majority of families are held by partner agencies, primary schools and health colleagues. The child protection lead practitioner is also introduced as part of the pillars, and we're currently looking at how we might introduce that into the Isle of Wight at a later date. But at this stage, the focus of our work is around family help and family practitioners. And the opportunities for the Isle of Wight are that the current commissioning arrangements, which are really positive on the Isle of Wight, it's a significant factor which will impact and influence the development of the new family help model. Most of our lead professionals sit within universal services, which is really positive and is a model that we're very pleased with. But there are some opportunities to look at how family help would be implemented quickly on the Isle of Wight, looking at localisation of teams around family help and family hubs, and considering how we might use the child protection lead practitioner role. So that's where we're at this point.
Thank you, Debbie.
Any questions?
Any questions for Debbie? Thank you, Stephanie, as well. Any questions at all? You've done a good job, Debbie. There, look, no questions. I've got one. What would you want the numbers, or what is the number you can measure as an outcome, a positive outcome? Because this sounds really good to me. This sounds like you've gone, we need this. You've all worked together and you've got it. So it sounds really positive. But is there anything you can measure in a year's time, say?
I guess the areas that we generally measure in terms of that, there are a number of things: performance, caseloads. It's about the numbers of children in need, re-referrals, all of the things that we would generally monitor. We need to monitor in light of the introduction of our family practitioners, as well as the quality of the work that they're doing and feedback from families. Now, we're able to do all of that in the work that we generally would do in monitoring our work as a whole. But obviously, one of the things that we will bear in mind is the point that family practitioners came in line on the Isle of Wight. We will be able to consider what the introduction of them made to all of those things at that point. But as I said, things like auditing of family practitioner cases is something that we're doing. We obviously look at all of the figures all of the time. We monitor their caseloads really carefully, as we monitor the caseloads of all of our staff. There's additional oversight for those particular workers in terms of the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Their team manager does make sure that they have oversight of that work with that child every week. So lots of oversight, looking at the numbers, doing all of the things that we do in our general work within the context of the introduction of this new role.
Thank you. Stuart, did you want to add anything? We stopped you talking, sorry.
The only thing I was going to add was recruitment and retention. I think that's a really, really key focus for us. We know that the cost of agency staff for the council is significant. And I just generally think if we have settled staff, lower caseloads, good throughput of work, actually hopefully we'll be able to reduce our reliance on agency social workers, and there'll be a cost benefit for the council overall.
Okay, am I right in assuming these family practitioners only came into being in March of this year? That's correct. The date,
yes.
2020. I think, why have we not got phases 1.3 and 1.4? But that answers that question. Thank you. That's good news. Any questions? Well, it's a great job, everyone. Thank you for that. If there's anybody got anything to add on the screen, if they wish, please put your hand up. I'm quite happy to have any additions. If not, we will move on. Committee's work plan, item 11. Most exciting bit for anybody that's not part of the committee, I know. The work plan is pretty full. Democratic Services has done a very good job of making sure it's full up. I don't know if anyone's spotted anything that wants to change. I haven't, and I've had a good look. The problem we do have is if we want to move anything around, it does make it quite difficult. I don't know if anyone on the committee spotted anything. If not, we'll move on. Stuart, Ashley.
No, I'm certainly not trying to make this difficult, but I do think at some future point, the school place planning issue, it was this committee that commissioned the work in the first place, and we did need to sort of square the circle, if I can put it that way, Chairman, at some future point. I just wanted it to be on the radar somewhere.
Yes, you are correct, and it is in for September.
Is it?
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that. My apologies.
It's all right. It's because we put it in as confusingly as possible, but it is in there. And you're right.
Okay.
I couldn't agree with you more, Stuart. I really couldn't agree with you more. Anybody, anything else to add? Okay, magic. Moving on to members' questions, if there are any. Councillor Stewart, Councillor Down a second.
It's actually exactly around this school place plan. One of the issues that I've seen, and if I give a little bit of a preamble, and I do apologise, I'll try and keep it fairly short, especially now. One of the things that I've been made aware of over quite a long period of time is school places on the island don't necessarily match with what we need. And so I've started to talk more recently to various head teachers, to unions, to staff, to local communities and the like. And I apologise for not having had the time to talk to you about this, but I would like to ask whether the committee would consider setting up a working party to bring in all of those people to actually consider specifically the most appropriate primary school footprint for the island as a high level approach. I'll just leave that there for the moment, but if I don't mention it now, the next meeting's way, way away. We need to start somewhere.
We're ahead, I can tell you ahead of you on that. That work has been undertaken, and if Mr. Richards is hanging around afterwards, he'll probably be able to talk to you for 10 minutes to explain where we've got to on that, and that's where the frustration lies, is that work has actually been done. So the frustration is in the fact is now how would you enact it? But yes, good point, Councillor Stewart, thank you. Councillor Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. May I ask a parochial question specifically about the ward? Thank you. It's about the works that took place at Wroxall. Now, why was the work started in 2022, 5 years after the sign off of the works? And reviewing the number to the reference to the building. Oh, hang on. Yeah. Reviewing the number, the building commenced. Why wasn't the building stopped when it wasn't needed, when there wasn't the numbers? Thank you, Chairman.
Do we have a response to that, or do we need to wait for a written response, Stuart? What's your take on that?
I'll give a very short verbal one, but provide a more detailed written if that's possible. If Democratic Services could send me the details of Councillor Downer's question. In short, as officers, we were unable to do anything until we had permission from Cabinet to consult on any changes. So until that point, it's business as usual.
Okay, thank you. And I'll ask Mel to send the question to you for further response. Okay. Any further questions? I just have one summary point, and you won't be surprised it is around place planning, because I think frustration exists on every side, from parents to officers to teachers to governors. And the place planning issue needs resolving. It's not, none of us are going to go out and create 300 odd children for all the will in the world, even if any of us thought we had the energy. It's not going to happen. So whatever the handbrake is, whether it's political or process, and I have my own thoughts on what it is, it needs resolving ASAP. And then this isn't about apportioning blame, this is about apportioning action. And for the sake of parents, children, teachers and support staff, Stuart's quite right, is when we get to September, it shouldn't be a case of just discussing it again. It should be a case of saying, well, this is the only action that's left. It doesn't matter how many times we put it on a trampoline, it's going to bounce down the same way, is that we do need to get that point. And it's just a summary of where I think we are. Other than that, you're all free to go into the lovely evening. Those of you going to festival, love it. Those of you on the other side of the water, well done for staying over that side. And thank you again for all your input and for the effort you've put into your reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.